housing, the 16th domestic policy issue. Housing is very expensive, whether you buy or rent. If you buy, prices have gone up 3 times from 1997 to 2007. In 10 years, have trebled. House prices have trebled. Why on earth is that? Well, apparently it's because of the banks. The banks love to lend money because in the act of lending they create money out of nothing, which is in their property, and it's a cheek, and it shouldn't be the case. But because that is the situation that we allow to exist, which we could correct, because we allow it to exist, the banks have a pecuniary interest, of course, in lending more and more and more, because they make more and more money in the act of creating it to lend it. And of course, therefore, the person who's prepared to borrow more from the banks, which the banks are perfectly happy to let them borrow, the person who borrows more gets the house. So house prices go up. So there's a bubble in house prices, an unnatural rise in the value of financial value of houses. If it wasn't for the banks, apparently the house prices would be much lower. And because it's expensive to buy, wrongly expensive to buy, it's also therefore expensive to rent, because people know that the value of a house for a particular period of time has a sort of amount of money labelled which you would be paying for the mortgage. So particularly if the landlord has got a mortgage to pay, he's going to be wanting to recoup that in rent. So rent gets, I mean, many hundreds of pounds a month to rent a place, even if you want a pretty simple room. And so if you haven't got the money coming in, if somehow your life has dropped a bit, so your family is broken up, or for some reason, or if you start drinking too much or something like that, it's very, very easy to become homeless. And so there are a lot of homeless people, and the governments of different kinds have been trying to address this, but it is still a problem. And there is a shortage of houses, and we're building houses, but not enough. I'm not quite sure why there's a housing shortage. I suppose immigration has got part of it. There are people coming into the country needing houses, which we need to provide somehow. But family breakdown, the disintegration of families because of family rows and breakup of marriage, breakup of cohabiting partnerships, means that more housing units are needed to house the same number of people. This produces loneliness. Then back in the time around the time of Mrs. Thatcher, there was a lot of energy behind getting people into home ownership, and also selling council houses, the right to buy. But the councils, the local authorities, were not allowed to reinvest that money in building new council houses. And so the number of council houses has dropped, and there are many who say that there's a big need to provide more social units of social housing, particularly council houses. There's a big need of housing in the country, because the more wealthy of us like to have second homes, or like to have their first home in a nice place in a village, and commute to their better paid job in the city or somewhere far away. But the trouble is that means that house prices in a rural environment go up to the level that town people are prepared to pay, and that young people trying to get their lives started and needing a house in the countryside, they can't afford them. It's a big problem, apparently. I'm not quite sure whether the pressure for houses justifies encroaching on the green belt, which is such a pleasure to encounter when you go out of a town. It'd be nice if we could preserve that, and I'm not up to speed with thinking on that. There's a great increase in technology of how to build houses quickly, simply, cheaply, and make them really good sound houses, particularly from an insulation and ecological point of view. And that's very interesting development, and I'd like to know more about that, and what delays us applying that to building lots of houses for people. And the government, I think it was the Labour government, I'm not sure, has been trying to build eco-towns. It's an interesting development. I don't understand it, but I'd like to understand the thinking behind that more. Housing, it's a really big issue, obviously near, if you'll excuse the pun, not implied jokingly, that it's very near to home, something that people feel very, very acutely, and it's important to get it right. And I think addressing the banking problem, not allowing banks to create money out of nothing, having the Bank of England as the sole creator of money in the country, that would reduce house prices, because it would reduce the incentive to commercial banks to create money in the act of lending mortgages. And I think we should do that, correct that without delay, stop the banks creating money.